Hello everyone, and welcome to this short video designed to help you get the most from your revision. Revision is one of the most important things you can do to help improve your examination grades. You and your teachers have worked hard all year in learning and teaching the things you need to know to do well in an exam. And revising properly gives you the opportunity to show that off and to get the best grades possible in your exams. You may feel that now that prelims are done, you can have a rest, but no. Now that you've got your prelims back, it's an excellent opportunity to redouble your efforts and to keep going. Use the feedback that you got from your teachers to identify those areas in terms of knowledge and skills where you're doing well, and those areas in terms of knowledge and skills where perhaps you need to put in a little bit more work. If you got some disappointing results, don't be downhearted. It's not time to panic. You don't need to worry about that. But what you should do instead is take this opportunity to use the prelim feedback and to use the skills and the knowledge we're going to look at in this presentation to drive forward that improvement that you need in terms of exam grades. So what makes revision work? Well, successful revision comes down to 5 things that you can see on the screen here. Firstly, retrieval practice. Secondly, spaced revision. Thirdly, effort. Fourthly, support. And fifthly, attendance. If you have all 5 of these, then your revision should be successful. Retrieval practice means using revision methods which help you learn, methods which work as opposed to those which don't work. And we will look at that much more on that later. If you don't use the right methods for revision, then you're going to end up with ineffective revision strategies, which will be reflected in your examination performance. Secondly, you need to space out when it is you revise. Take time to plan when and what you are going to revise. This helps you to avoid the dreaded cramming of the night before an exam. Thirdly, you will need to make an effort. Revision is hard, but it is worth it. If you don't put in the required effort, that will show and you will underperform in your exams. So a little sacrifice now in terms of effort and time will pay off massively in the long term. Fourthly, we should remember that you're not alone. We all need support, and this is absolutely true when you're revising. If you feel unsupported, you may suffer anxiety. So perhaps find a study buddy. Use your family and your friends for support. Ask us in school. We want you to succeed, and we want you to succeed without any anxiety. Finally, you need to make sure you've been to as many lessons as possible. Missing lessons means gaps in your knowledge, and those knowledge gaps could be the very things they ask you about in the exam. But don't worry, even if there are some gaps, even if you have missed some lessons, speak to your teachers, look at your friends' notes, look at your friends' jotters, check the Google Classrooms that you're in. You can always find resources to help fill these gaps. Before we get down to the best ways to revise, though, I just want to talk about a few common myths about studying that come up again and again, and to explain to you why they're not helpful. Firstly, learning styles. You or your parents and carers may have heard about learning styles or learning preferences. You may have even been told that you study best in a particular way. Maybe someone's told you you're a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. Simply put, these are not true. Learning styles don't exist. At best, it would be a learning preference. But just because we prefer something doesn't mean that it's good for us. If I had a choice between a chocolate bar or an apple for a snack, I'd prefer the chocolate bar. But it doesn't mean that it's best for me. Secondly, and very similarly, is the learning pyramid, which tells you that you will learn more by teaching others than you will do by any other method. This is a complete myth. You don't retain 90% of what you teach others. No one can prove this. There are no studies which back this up. But it's a persistent idea. You do need to find different methods of revision, and they can be more or less effective for you, but they do not follow this pyramid. Thirdly, and this is perhaps the biggest of the myths and the one which is most important, is the idea of multitasking. Lots of people like to think they could multitask. Lots of people like to think they could maybe revise whilst having other distractions in the room. However, we can't. Our brains only have a limited amount of capacity for focus, and it's really difficult to do many things at once. A better term would be task switching, where our brains move from focusing on one task to another. So when it comes to revision, put away those distractions. Your social media can wait. You shouldn't have YouTube open in the background, and you should avoid listening to music. Remove as many of the distractions as you possibly can when you sit down to revise. So just how do we revise? These next 3 slides will help you to get ready for when you want to start your revision. Firstly, and this is perhaps the most important thing we can learn about revision today, is something called the Pomodoro technique. Put simply, this means inserting breaks into our revision to help our brains work at their best. The longer we use our brains, the more we forget, the more we lose focus. Having a break lets our brains reset to peak efficiency so that over time we lose less focus. The Pomodoro technique works like this. You sit down to revise and you set yourself a timer for 25 minutes. When that timer goes off, you have a 5-minute break. Your brain then resets and you do another 25 minutes of revision, followed by a 5-minute break. Every 4th break should be between 25 and 30 minutes. And as I said earlier, spacing out your revision is important. Spaced retrieval, or spaced repetition, is a scientifically proven way to maximize learning whilst actually reducing the amount of time you need to revise. It involves reviewing information, revising if you like, at closer intervals, boosting your memory and making it less likely that you forget everything. One way to do this is through what we call the 2-3-5-7 method. Here's an example. This year's geography exam is on the 29th of April. So using the 2-3-5-7 method, you would schedule a revision session for the day before, on the 28th. Then working backwards, you'd schedule 1-2 days before that, on the 26th of April. Then 3 days before that, on the 23rd. 5 days before that one, and then 7 days before. This allows you to space out your revision. Now, of course, you can and probably should have other sessions scheduled before that. But the key thing is to make sure that they're spaced out and you're leaving gaps between it and you're not cramming. Almost time for the best methods to charge up your revision. But before we get there, I want to just explain why 2 very common revision methods should be avoided. The first of these is highlighting. We all love a good highlighter. Highlighting notes is a common way of revising. It's probably something that your parents and carers and your teachers did when they were studying. However, it isn't really effective for 2 main reasons. Firstly, highlighting stuff does not mean you've learned it. For example, let's say you've got a part in a play. You're given the script, you take out your highlighter and you highlight all of your lines in that script. That does not mean you've learned it. You still have to learn the lines. Secondly, we tend to highlight just what we think of as the important stuff. But what happens when you're revising things and everything's important? The next method, a very common method for revising, is cramming. Simply put, this is not a great way to revise. It's very tempting to spend all night before an exam reading and rereading our notes to ensure that it all goes in. The problem is, though, that if you're just reading and rereading your notes and you're not using an effective method of revising, very little's going to stick. Even worse, cramming will make you tired. And if you're tired in an exam, you cannot perform at your best. And it may also make you anxious. And if you're anxious in an exam, you will not perform at your best. So, night before an exam, don't cram, have a sleep instead. So, we've looked at why we should revise, how to get the best from revision, and a couple of things to avoid. Now, as we come to some very helpful techniques to make your revision as effective as possible, it's important to remember that this is not an exhaustive list of methods, but each of the methods you're about to see has been proven to work. They are what we call active methods of recall, which will help you transform your notes and your jotters in a way which will ensure that you can recall as much as possible in the exams. Firstly, flashcards. Now, flashcards are brilliant. It's best to make them up as you go through the year. Every week or so, make up some flashcards covering the information that you've learned in the last couple of lessons. But it's also okay at the end of a year when you sit down to revise to make up a set of flashcards. The important thing is to keep it simple. On one side of a flashcard, you write a question that you want answered or a key term that you want defined. On the other side of the flashcard, you write the answer or the definition. Use clear, short phrases and keywords to make reviewing easier. The flashcard is there to jog your memory to help you find the information that you need. When you've made your flashcards, remember, use them often. Perhaps the best way to use them is to use something called the likeness system. And if you scan this QR code that's on the screen, it'll take you to a YouTube video explaining how to use that system. Brain dumps are a good, solid way to start a revision session. Take a piece of paper and literally dump everything you can remember about a topic onto it. Then read through your notes and, in a different color pen, add anything that you missed. Graphic organizers or mind maps are another proven way to transform your notes into a manageable and useful tool. Read through your notes and create a graphic organizer as you go along. Add to it the more you go through your notes. And then once you've got them, here's the important thing, is that you don't just put them to one side. You have to look over them regularly. Use them as a way to jog your mind and to jog your memory about the important information. It's always okay to add more information to a graphic organizer, but once you've got them, make sure that you're looking through them regularly. A similar technique to a brain dump is what we call blurting. But instead of doing it before you read your notes, this time you would do it after. Read through your notes, your jotters, your textbooks, and then on a piece of paper, perhaps put down a few headings to guide yourself. And then in each section, you blurt. That is, you write down as much about that section as you can. Once you're done, read your notes again and make sure that you add anything you've missed and repeat the process. If you take your time with these, they will also produce handy little cheat sheets that you can use one side of A4 with loads of information on. So blurting, very similar, like I said, to brain dumps, but the difference is you do it after you've read through your notes. Past paper questions are one more excellent way to revise. You can find past papers online, and you should attempt to complete as many past paper questions as possible, making sure that you at least cover all of the different types of question you could face. So, for example, were you studying National 5 history, there are 6 different types of question that you can face in the exam. So you should practice each one of those, a mixture of questions. You don't have to sit an entire paper. You could just do a section of a paper or a question from the paper. When you search for these papers online, you will often find, particularly if you go to the SQA website, that the past papers are published, but published alongside them are the marking instructions. And I would say that you should use these as well, because they tell you exactly what the examiners are looking for. Do as much of this as you can. Do as many questions as you can. And when you've done them, go through the marking scheme, assess them yourself. But it's also okay, and I would highly recommend that you bring them into school to your teachers. We will be happy to mark them. We will give you feedback. We will say what you've done well, and we'll tell you where you can improve. I promise you, the teachers that you have here do not mind marking these. So as we reach the end, I want to remind you that these methods, they're just suggestions, but they are proven to work. And you should start revising as early as you can and find the methods that work for you. Keep mixing it up, keep it active, and maximize the amount of information that you can take in. You may have questions, you may have concerns, you may be anxious about things, and that's okay. If you have questions or if there's something that you're worried about, remember that the school, your teachers can and want to help. Speak to your subject teachers, speak to your guidance teacher, speak to the principal teachers. Please don't think that we don't want to help you, or that we can't help you, or that we're too busy to help you. We want you to succeed as much as you do.